this unique online event and for important conversations regarding graduate student professional development, especially as we are all navigating unprecedented change and uncertainties together. The main purpose of this event is to expose graduate students to a diversity of professional paths, to provide them with practical information and tangible next steps, and to connect them with the amazing network of support they have available to them throughout the broader Princeton community. This 3-day online event represents the graduate school at Princeton University's strong commitment to preparing our graduate students with the professional skills and competencies they will need now and in the future. In just a few moments, Dean Sarah Jane Leslie will introduce our keynote speakers.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us at the Grad Futures Forum for today's session on innovation, entrepreneurship, and graduate education. I'm delighted to introduce Rodney Priestley, Princeton's inaugural Vice Dean for Innovation. Professor Priestley excels in both fundamental research and in the development and translation of intellectual property derived from his research into products and enterprises. He brings not only vast experience, but also great enthusiasm and creativity to his new position. Today, he will share the ways Princeton will expand ties with industry, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, alumni, and other potential partners, and efforts to grow Princeton's culture of innovation among faculty, graduate students, and other researchers through activities such as workshops, networking events, and trainings. Professor Priestley has also invited a special guest to join him for a fireside chat at 1 p.m. Dr. Udit Batra, graduate class of '96, CEO of Millipore Sigma, is an accomplished executive who has dedicated his career to improving health for people globally, bringing more than 20 years of experience in healthcare and the life sciences. Dr. Batra has earned a well-deserved reputation for driving business growth and turnarounds, as well as building high-performing teams. We're looking forward to hearing more about his career journey and his leadership of Millipore Sigma at this critical time. We are delighted to have both Vice Dean Priestley and Dr. Udit Batra join us at the Grad Futures Forum today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dean Leslie, for the kind introduction of myself and Udit Batra. I'm delighted to welcome everyone to this session on innovation, entrepreneurship, and graduate education. I'm going to start this session off by giving a presentation that provides an overview of the innovation ecosystem, as well as ways in which graduate students can engage with the growing innovation ecosystem on campus. To start this presentation, I'd like to first provide a 3-minute video that provides an overview of the innovation ecosystem here on campus, as well as the reasons and rationale why we are pursuing this innovation initiative.
At Princeton, we recognize that strengthening New Jersey's innovation ecosystem enhances a vital aspect of the university's educational mission. Increasingly, our students and faculty hope to bring their knowledge to bear on social, cultural, and economic problems through entrepreneurial activity.
When you think about the history of Princeton, you think about rigor, a place that does foundational research. But what's exciting right now is the way Princeton's bringing together rigor and relevance to tackle major societal challenges.
I think the initiative at Princeton University starts with its faculty and its research, and then looks for ways to tie into New Jersey's innovation economy.
But if I had to identify 2 things that I thought were quite significant, one would be the creation of the PEC, the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council. The second major initiative that I would say that's been quite significant is the creation of the Princeton Entrepreneurship Hub.
The Andlinger Center is very external facing. We see external partners as one of our primary constituents. And that external facing is really inspired by President Eisgruber. I think innovation and research on campus under his leadership has really turned inside out.
One of the things that we've come to recognize is that it's critical for us to be interacting with partners outside the university and to be nourishing our students' dreams of leading in entrepreneurship, of taking the things that they're learning in the classroom and being able to make them have a difference in the world.
The first thing that comes to mind to me as Dean for Research is the very satisfying growth of industry involvement in our research enterprise.
Princeton has amazing discoveries going on in all of its STEM departments every day. And some of these discoveries can save lives. Some of them are new ways to deal with energy. They can save the planet. And I think there's a realization that that should all get out to the world. And this innovation initiative is to get a lasso around it and kind of put out a welcome mat for Princeton to work with players outside.
Bold.
Dynamic.
Entrepreneurial. I can't do it in just one word, because I think Princeton University is welcoming, it's expanding, it's collaborative.
Rapidly growing.
Actually, I have more than one word to capture innovation and Princeton. The words are excitement, momentum, discovery, and possibilities.
So I'm always motivated when I hear that presentation. Words that stick out to me include, innovation, entrepreneurship, bold, dynamic, excitement, partnerships, possibilities. And this is what I think about when I think about the innovation initiative at Princeton. What I also take from this video is that the efforts to grow the innovation ecosystem here on campus is widespread, ranging from the president to the faculty, to the students and the staff, as well as the alumni. And collectively, it will be us as a group that grow the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem, here on campus. In this session today, will be two parts. In the first part, I'll make a presentation that answers a few questions in terms of why now and what is unique about Princeton and innovation and entrepreneurship. I'll also like to present what will be our mission, our core values, as well as our priorities as we grow our innovation ecosystem. And then I'd like to present an overview of what this system currently is, and then highlight ways in which our current graduate students can actually engage in innovation and entrepreneurship activities here on campus. And then I'll highlight some new programs that we are developing. And then in the second part of this session, I'm extremely excited to be hosting a conversation with Dr. Udit Batra, Star 96, on graduate education, professional development, innovation, and leading in a time of crisis. So often when I talk about innovation and entrepreneurship at Princeton and what we'd like to do, the first question that typically comes to me is why? Why innovation and entrepreneurship at Princeton? And there are many reasons why we would like to further our engagement in innovation and entrepreneurship beyond the embodiment of the university's motto. The first of which is to have a greater impact on society, sparked by our fundamental research as well as applied research, discoveries, and creation at the highest level. There's increased interest from our faculty, students, and alumni, as you heard in the video from President Eisgruber, to further engage in innovation and entrepreneurship. We also have interest in supporting both the region and the global innovation ambitions of our community. And then we also see a very close connection between our research and teaching mission with innovation and entrepreneurship, and how innovation and entrepreneurship can enhance what we do here on campus by way of teaching and research. The second question that I often get asked with regard to this topic is, well, why now? Why is now the right time for Princeton to be more engaged in innovation and entrepreneurship? And one question, or one way I may go about answering this is, well, why not now? Okay, but there are reasons why we are pursuing this initiative at the moment. There's certainly an increase in the number of patents that are submitted by our faculty, as well as our students and postdocs. I like to remind people that most invention disclosures and patents that are disclosed to the university includes a graduate student as a primary inventor on the technology. We also see that there's an increase in the number of spin-outs that are being started by faculty, many of which started in collaboration with our graduate students, that are licensing intellectual property from the university. Through our corporate engagement and foundation relations office, there's an increase in the number of partnerships that we have with established corporations to either fund basic research here on campus or to license intellectual property that have been developed by our faculty. And so, with that, the kind of overall reason why now for us is we want to help to create a better future based on the research that's being uncovered and discovered here on campus. The third question that I often get asked around innovation and entrepreneurship at Princeton, well, what is going to be unique about us? What's going to make us different in this space? And I like to point out that one of the things that makes Princeton unique and distinctive is that we combine world-class science and engineering with world-class liberal arts and social sciences, okay? Innovation, as I'll highlight, is a societal process that requires an understanding of the human experience. So we're very fortunate of this very close integration between our sciences and our arts here on campus. And that is what's going to drive the innovation that we do here on campus and sets us apart. A few years ago, there was a very interesting study that came out of Google that tried to identify the top skills of the most innovative people in the company. And what they found out, to their surprise, is that out of the top 8 skills that their innovators possessed, number 8 was technical skills. The first 7 of those skills were professional skills or soft skills, as they say. And it is those types of skills that our students receive in their training here at Princeton that's going to allow us to build the innovation ecosystem here in the manner that sets us apart, and also in a manner that sets our graduate students when they go off to become innovators apart as well. So what I would like to do now in this presentation is walk you through what will be our mission, our core values, as well as our priorities as we build the innovation ecosystem here at Princeton. And so we have 2 statements for our mission. The first will be to encourage, facilitate, and promote innovation, entrepreneurship, and partnerships that will enhance the quality and impact of research and teaching here at Princeton University. So as I alluded to, we see the possibility of innovation and entrepreneurship certainly uplifting our research and teaching. The fact that we're going to be able to translate the discoveries that we make here on campus to the real world provides a greater impact to society. Secondly, we will enhance and support humanity through a well-integrated and nurtured innovation ecosystem that serves to promote the quality of life for all. Again, we're not in this alone. We understand that there's an ecosystem that's developing here in the state and within the region, et cetera, that wants to expand innovation and entrepreneurship. And as an institution, we're going to do our part to be committed to the growth of this innovation ecosystem by making sure that our campus is open and welcome to outside partners. We will be rooted in several core values as we expand our efforts in innovation and entrepreneurship. First, we will be collaborative. Innovation at Princeton is encouraged, facilitated, and nurtured in a manner that bridges and builds on the strengths of all in the innovation ecosystem, as I will highlight. We will be focused on the community. We'll have unwavering commitment to the community of researchers and entrepreneurs to build a culture that supports the innovation here on campus. We will also be inclusive. Innovation is a societal process which is enhanced by the participation of all of society. We are committed to diversity as an integral part of innovation. We will evolve. The only thing that remains constant is that everything changes. And so as we experiment and introduce new programs to expand innovation and entrepreneurship on campus, we will measure progress and impact and evolve accordingly. We will also be bold. Our mission requires us to be bold in thought as well as in action for Princeton to realize its potential and innovation and to have the impact that we seek. And we will be open. We will embrace the external community. We will be open to change, and we will be open to innovation. And so when we introduce any new programs connected to innovation and entrepreneurship here on campus, we will make sure that they are connected to our core values. We will make sure that programs are collaborative in nature. We're focused on our community. They are inclusive, bold, and that we have partnerships. What will be some of our key priorities as we kick off this initiative? We want to enable faculty and researchers, and of course these researchers include graduate students, to translate their work into commercial and nonprofit ventures by promoting or providing training and support. We will increase the university's openness and make it a more welcoming and inviting to expand external partnerships. We will build a culture supportive of innovation and entrepreneurship amongst our community. And we will promote awareness of the university's innovation and entrepreneurship activities and signal to partners our openness via greater communication. What I'd like to do now is provide an overview of the current innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem here on campus. Now, in terms of what some of our focal points are, education and experience is clearly one. We want to provide educational programming for our students as well as experiences for our students to participate in innovation and entrepreneurship. We want to support new ventures, new spin-outs, new startups that emanate out of research done here on campus or insights or ideas developed on campus as well. We want to support innovation, and we also want to support collaborations with industry. And so with those kind of four foci, the current kind of picture or framework of what the innovation ecosystem looks like is presented here. We have, for instance, the Keller Center for Innovation and Engineering Education is kind of the home of innovation education here on campus. The Princeton Entrepreneurship Council is the home for entrepreneurial activities at Princeton University. The Office of Technology and Licensing and Corporate Engagement and Foundation Relations, which some of you might be aware of, sits in the Office of the Dean for Research. And they work, both behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to bring partnerships to campus, to help faculty license technology, to help spin-outs develop, etc. The Graduate Futures program, which all of you are aware of because you're here today, provides professional development experiences to our graduate students that includes innovation and entrepreneurship. And we're very fortunate to have off-campus innovation spaces, including the Princeton Innovation Center, which is a wet lab space, and the Entrepreneurial Hub, which is dry lab space in Palmer Square. We're also supported by student groups, and one group in particular I'd like to highlight is the Graduate Consulting Club. It was one of the first student groups that reached out to me when I was named Vice Dean for Innovation, and I've enjoyed my conversations with this group and the ideas that we thought about in terms of expanding innovation and entrepreneurship support and training for our graduate students. I'd also like to highlight that we have a very vibrant alumni network of innovators and entrepreneurs as well. And so what I'll do here in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so is kind of walk you through several examples connected to education and experiences, support for new ventures, support for innovation, as well as support for collaborations with industry. Before I do that, I'd like to point out that these different entities, centers, institutes on campus come together to form this very vibrant web of innovation that we certainly look forward to growing, extending, and expanding here in the next several years. So with regards to education and experiences, here I just highlight a snapshot of some very recent activities that have occurred here on campus that are certainly open to our graduate student population. Within the Keller Center, for instance, they run summer school immersion programs, they run their certificate program, and they also put on a range of seminar series connected to innovation and entrepreneurship. The Keller Center also hosts the annual Innovation Forum, which is a pitch competition connected to spin-outs that are licensing intellectual property from the university. Within the Office of the Dean for Research, there's Celebrate Princeton Innovation. It's an annual event that occurs in the fall that highlights inventions that are emanating from faculty research. And again, that research is often connected to our graduate students here. There are also a range of other activities that occur throughout the year that our graduate students can participate in. With regards to support for new ventures, there's been a lot of progress in this area in the past several years. One of which I'll highlight is the new position that was created 3 years ago with my colleague, Tony Williams, who's a new faculty ventures associate. And so although his title has the word faculty in it, I can guarantee you that my colleague, Tony, is interested in speaking with graduate students who want to create new ventures. And I know this is something he is currently doing. And so Tony sits in the Office of Technology and Licensing, and he's here to help guide our graduate students through the process of creating new ventures. We also have financial support that I highlight here, such as Nassau Street Ventures, Fitzgates Ventures, IP Group, Princeton Angel Alumni, etc. All that are interested in sponsoring or investing in startups that are connected to the university. I've already mentioned the Office of Technology and Licensing. The Princeton Entrepreneurship Council, as I will highlight later, is the entrepreneurial hub on campus, and they provide a range of different support mechanisms for innovation and entrepreneurship as well. One of which I highlight here is Office Hours in the City, again, which is a resource that is available to our graduate students who want to pursue innovation and entrepreneurship. And perhaps the last thing that I will point out on this slide here is that, again, within Office of Technology and Licensing, we currently have 3 executives in residence or entrepreneurs in residence whose primary responsibility is to assist faculty and researchers who want to spin out new enterprises and serve as a mentor for these individuals. So again, I encourage our graduate students who are interested in spin outs to connect with the folks in the Office of Technology and Licensing, such as Tony Williams, or the executives in residence. Here, I just like to highlight some recent ventures that are licensing university intellectual property. Again, many of these spin-outs have been co-founded by graduate students here in recent years. With regards to support for innovation, there are many different things that we do here on campus. And so here I'm just highlighting 3. One way we go about supporting innovation here on campus is through the Intellectual Property Accelerator Fund. Now, let's say there's an invention or discovery that's been developed in a research lab between a faculty member and a graduate student, but now they want to do kind of more applied research, translational research, developmental research to further that IP development. This is what the IP Accelerator allows for. We also recognize, again, here that one of the strengths on campus is the integration between the arts and the sciences. And so we have a fund that's specifically designed to promote collaborations and encourage collaborations between artists and scientists here on campus. And then lastly, the final fund that I will mention here, sponsored by an alumnus, is the Eric and Wendy Smith Fund. And this is a fund, again, here that supports very high risk research that would lead to new technologies that would have a major impact on society. What I'd like to do now is at least highlight our spaces. I'm very excited that we have both on-campus as well as off-campus spaces to support our innovation ecosystem. For instance, the eHub here in Palmer Square, the Entrepreneurship Council, our Princeton Innovation Center, which is a short 3-mile drive away. I certainly encourage everyone to visit the Princeton Innovation Center. The PCI, the Princeton Catalyst Initiative, our Lake campus, and so we're very excited about the possibility of innovation and entrepreneurship on our Lake campus and the possibility of co-locating spaces there in which we have research as well as corporations in a single site. The Keller Center, I've mentioned, and then of course the Office of the Dean for Research. And so this just provides you with a snapshot of what our current spaces regarding innovation and entrepreneurship looks like, and we certainly look forward to the growth of those spaces. Support for industrial collaborations is led through corporate engagement and foundation relations here on campus. Many of you may not be aware of CEFR. A lot of the work that they do may be in the background for graduate students, but it's an integral part of our innovation ecosystem. And so they spark new collaborations between researchers here on campus and industry. One of the exciting programs that's run through CEFR is the Innovation Funds for Industry Collaboration. And so this is a very nice mechanism to encourage, again, collaborations between faculty and industrial partners. So with that overview of the current innovation ecosystem here on campus, perhaps one question that graduate students are currently asking, well, what is innovation? Why do I hear about innovation all the time? Why is this a new initiative on campus? And so answering that first question, I think, is key. And many of you are probably formulating in your minds right now, well, what is innovation? Or many of you are probably doing what I did, many years ago when I asked this question to myself, what is innovation? Is that I went to google.com and I searched, what is innovation? And so if you do that, the first definition that will come up will be from Webster's dictionary, and it will define, innovation as the introduction of something new. For those who've read about innovation in the past, you may have more specific definitions about what innovation is in fact. And here I highlight two of them. The specific instrument of entrepreneurship, the act that endows resources with a new capacity to create wealth, is one definition. And then another is innovation is significant positive change. And these are in fact perhaps all correct, but one can ask, well, how useful are they? And perhaps what's missing most from these definitions here is the lack of process, the lack that innovation in and of itself is a process that involves certain steps. And so with that, the definition that I like to present in terms of what is innovation is that innovation is the process of creating value by applying novel solutions to meaningful problems. And I like this definition again because it identifies that innovation is a process, it identifies that something must be novel, and it also identifies that something must be meaningful and worthwhile in pursuit. And so if you're thinking about activities that you're doing, and if you want to know that you are engaging in the innovation process, perhaps you should ask yourself, these three questions. Is it novel? Does it solve a meaningful problem? And does it create value? And in fact, from my perspective, and I think from the perspective of the university, I probably would make one small change to this definition. And so instead of having it as, well, as innovation is the process of creating value, I would say innovation is the process of creating impact. Because for us, value is not always the measure, it's the impact of our research, our ideas, and insights here at Princeton that's going to matter the most. When I think about innovation, I'm often, driven back to a quote that has stuck with me for a while from former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt that goes like this: small minds discuss people, gossip, as they say. Good minds discuss events, and great minds discuss ideas or perhaps innovations. And I certainly like to think that we have great minds here at Princeton, and for those reasons, we're actively engaged and involved in idea creation and innovation. And so if you're asking yourself, well, why should I be interested in the topic of innovation? I'd like to provide three reasons for you. First of which is I think it's a trait or skill that will be attractive to recruiters. And so as you leave campus here and you graduate and you prepare for your professional careers, I think an understanding of the innovation process will be vital. Second, Your participation in and response to innovation, and more specifically, your employer's culture of innovation, will have an impact on your career. So again, it's just something that will not be avoided as you move forward in your career. And then third, it can help to provide an understanding of the potential impact of your work. A related question, well, why should you be interested in entrepreneurship? And again, there are many reasons why you should be interested in engaging in entrepreneurial activities. And here I just provide three. The first of which is to participate in the translation of one's own ideas and research. Again, as a researcher, this is something we're always thinking about. How can we enhance the impact? And if you decide to pursue a new venture or startup of your work, this will allow you to have a positive and direct impact on society, which is the second reason why you should think about entrepreneurship. And then the third reason is, it's a challenging endeavor. Entrepreneurship is hard, but it helps to build confidence. It provides opportunity for collaboration and networking. It also provides insights into cultures and environments. As I noted, innovation and entrepreneurship is a societal process. And so one of the things you should be thinking about here during your time at Princeton is to consider taking courses outside of your discipline to expand your horizon. Be involved in diverse cohorts and groups. Obtaining internships, this certainly will be part of the topic of conversation in part 2 of this session. Oftentimes, there are many reasons why people do not pursue innovation and entrepreneurship, as career paths. And so I'm drawn to this book here, The Myths of Innovation. I'd like to perhaps dispel some of those myths that might be in the minds of some of you here today. We mistakenly obsess about flashes of insights or ideas. It's this myth here of this epiphany. And a course that I teach in Chemical and Biological Engineering, CBE 507, I pass out to the students in that class a book called Where Do Good Ideas Come From? And one of the main ideas from this book is that ideas and innovations often fade into view over time. And so they're not these flashes of insights. They've been lingering in the back of one's mind for quite some time, and it's often connections and conversations that you have with other people that allows you to bring those ideas to the forefront. The second one, defining a problem well is as important as solving it. And Einstein once said that if I had 20 days to solve a problem, I would take 19 days to define it, and then 1 day to solve it. And so the real take-home message here is, don't speed past the problem towards the solution. Take some time to think about the questions and the problems that are being asked. The third myth is that we often overstate, individual contributions and under-recognize teams. And so this idea that, innovation and entrepreneurship happens in isolation or alone is certainly a myth. Everyone has been influenced by others, have had a support staff, and learning to collaborate perhaps matters more than one's own brilliance. And then the final point that I'll make here is that, progress and, market success are inherently, unpredictable. And the truth of entrepreneurship, which to me makes it, even all the more exciting, is that you can do everything right and still fail because certain things are just beyond your control. Okay. So what I'd like to do here as I wrap up, this session is to provide you with my 2 favorite books on innovation and entrepreneurship. The first of which is The Innovator's Dilemma. And when I think about this book, the quote that really comes to mind to me that sticks out is that in order to achieve something you've never had, you must do something you've never done. And to me, this book lays out the steps or the skills that one should be trying to develop to become a better innovator. And my favorite book on entrepreneurship is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And the quote that comes to mind to me when I think about what's in this book is that ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. And again, this book drives home the fact that entrepreneurship is not easy. It will be challenging, but that's the exciting thing about it. And so I encourage everyone who's listening in today that in the chat session to write in, what your favorite book is on innovation and entrepreneurship that we can share. So what I like to do here in perhaps the next 10 minutes or so is walk through 3 centers or institutes on campus and explain how graduate students can actually get involved at the moment in these centers or institutes. And so the first is the Keller Center for Innovation and Engineering Education, which sits within the School of Engineering. But as an institute, it is open to the entire campus. It provides a rigorous education in entrepreneurship, and I can certainly attest to that. Even this past fall, I sat in on a course within the Keller Center on innovation that was quite engaging and exciting. So there's certainly curricular activities that I encourage our graduate students to take advantage of, but there are also co-curricular activities. I mentioned the Innovation Forum, for instance. I've had graduate students from my own research group participate in Innovation Forum. There are eLab, summer accelerator programs, etc., that students should look into. The Keller Center is certainly having an impact, not only on undergraduate education, but also on graduate education, as you can tell here from a select list of quotes. The lessons I've learned through the Keller Center have taught me what it means to be truly in the nation's service, for instance. The Keller Center and the eLab programs provide unique opportunity for full-time work on an idea related to innovation. And the Keller Center has been the most welcoming home for doers here on campus. And so for all of the doers out there, I certainly encourage you to look up the Keller Center and figure out how ways you can be involved, whether or not it's taking coursework or be involved in some of the programming that they put on, such as the Innovation Forum, which will take place this fall. And so what I'd like to do now is discuss the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council, but before I do that, I'd like to show one more video.
Please join me in welcoming Tom Siegel. The social nexus becomes the university of the research institution. Hey, we're here. I mean, all of this happened.
I've really enjoyed my time here at the San Francisco Tiger Entrepreneurs Conference. It's been a great opportunity to meet young founders and learn about their companies and the things they're doing.
When we think of earlier stage pipeline, developing different candidates.
This will be an informative workshop. It will be an interactive workshop.
It's amazing for me to see the number of initiatives that are now happening related to entrepreneurship at Princeton.
So don't be shy about selling your vision.
As we power into the 21st century, we're seeing a massive step function in information technology that changes everything.
Coming to the conference today has really continued to expand my horizons of what it means to be a Princeton entrepreneur.
So again, the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council is the entrepreneurial home here on campus. It provides a range of activities and mechanisms for support for faculty, staff, and students. And several things I'd like to highlight for you here. The first of which is Princeton Entrepreneurship Council publishes the Tiger Entrepreneurs magazine that's shown down here. I certainly encourage you to take a look at that magazine. It provides quite a bit of information about the innovation ecosystem and the range of activities that's taking place on campus. One of the activities that PC puts on is Tiger Talks. Tiger Talks in the city, and now Tiger Talks on the road, and even more so now Tiger Talks digitally. These are panels that take place again throughout the country that often engages a graduate student to be part of the panel. There's the Alumni Entrepreneurs Fund that was run through the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council that supported startups that were founded by recent alumni, including graduate students. I mentioned that the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council also hosts office hours. Again, these are office hours that are open to our graduate students. It's an online process for signing up. So if you're interested and getting mentorship with regards to innovation and entrepreneurship, this is certainly something that you should look into. It's a resource that we have here for our graduate students. The Princeton Entrepreneurship Council also recently launched the Princeton Spark podcast. Again, this is another way in which we're trying to enhance and drive the culture of innovation and entrepreneurship here on campus. So again, I encourage you all to take a look at the Princeton Spark podcast. PEC hosts a range of activities. I'm very delighted that many of these activities will be coming to campus here in the near future. I show this slide here to make sure that I drive home the point that we're open to the entire campus. In the spring, PEC put on an Arts and Entrepreneurship Day or conference. And so we're not just focused on the technology side, we're also focused on the arts, the culture, the social impact side of entrepreneurship as well. And in the fall, PEC put on the Tiger Entrepreneurial Conference, where we certainly had a range of students participate. Now that things have went virtually, I certainly encourage you to go to the PEC website that's highlighted down here. They've introduced, again, several new programs and activities that would be of interest to graduate students, such as the PEC Funding Series, the PEC Legal Lunch Bites, Monday Nights Entrepreneurship, and Tiger Talks Digital. The last thing I want to highlight with regards to the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council is they have a very big, ambitious goal to essentially map out the Princeton innovation ecosystem, both here on campus, within the region, and within the world broadly. And so I encourage you again to go to the website highlighted up here and to put yourself on the Princeton innovation ecosystem map. This will make sure that we're always in contact with you and you're always aware of the programming and activities that we put on with regards to innovation and entrepreneurship. So the last program that I will highlight that you are certainly aware of and that you should certainly be engaged in is the Graduate Futures Program. And within the Graduate Futures Program, there's a tremendous amount of activity connected to innovation and entrepreneurship that you should be aware of. Some of these activities, including inviting graduate students to conferences held here on campus, such as the IP China Roadshow and the Drug Discovery Day that was put on by CEFR. We've also invited students to things like the Tiger Entrepreneur Conference that I just mentioned earlier. There are industry exploration days that are put on. There are learning cohorts, and I'm very pleased that one of those learning cohorts is connected to innovation and entrepreneurship. And then we're also exploring and expanding ways in which we can connect our graduate students with industry partners by way of internships and collaborations, etc. And so with that, one of the new programs that I'd actually like to highlight and share with you today is one in terms of creating innovation opportunities, and one that was sparked by the leader of Millipore Sigma, who I'm going to be engaging with in conversation after my presentation. And this is an exclusive internship opportunity with Millipore Sigma, set up again between Millipore and the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering here at Princeton, where we guarantee internships to our incoming cohort G1 graduate students prior to acceptance of our offer. As you can see here from the list, Millipore Sigma was so gracious in developing almost 30 different internship offers for our incoming graduate students into chemical and biological engineering. Those students were very excited about this program. Many have signed up for this program. And one of the things that I think is going to be very unique about this partnership is that not only will our students be engaged in research at Millipore Sigma, there's also a professional development component of this internship that's being co-developed with the Graduate Futures Program. I'd like to highlight one more opportunity. Again, this one is connected to entrepreneurship support and training. How are we expanding access to entrepreneurial activities for our graduate students? One of the things that I'm very excited about is that Princeton is leading and serving as a principal institution along with our partners, Rutgers University and the University of Delaware, in submitting a NSF I-Corps grant to develop a I-Corps hub titled the Deep Tech Hub, the Diverse Emerging Entrepreneurial Partnership Tech Hub, with 8 institutions within the region, again, to help grow our regional innovation ecosystem. And the nexus of the I-Core Deep Tech Hub, aims to facilitate the transition of innovation, deep technology that would have been supported by the National Science Foundation or its partner institutes such as the NIH or the Department of Energy, Department of Defense, with a focus on inclusion to build teams that would go out and do customer discovery that would eventually create new enterprises from that customer discovery. So again, we're very fortunate to be at the center of this Deep Tech Hub and to partner with 7 other institutions to try and bring the Deep Tech Hub to Princeton. And graduate students will be an integral part of this initiative because the focal point of the I-Core program is a team model. And the lead of the teams are about 80% graduate students. And so it'd be the graduate students that will be leading the teams with the faculty lead as well as a business lead in the customer discovery process. I'd also like to, perhaps debut 2 programs that I will tell you to stay tuned for the development that we're working on, again, to help provide, new opportunities and support for those interested in innovation and entrepreneurship. The first of which is an innovation fellowship. As a graduate students, most of you know that postdoctoral fellowships are designed to turn PhDs into academics. This fellowship here will be designed to turn PhDs into entrepreneurs. So we're very excited about the development of this program, and we look forward to providing more detail later. The second program is the Startup Innovation Fund. And again, this is something here that is quite unique, and we're very excited about because it's connected to our rigorous educational mission. And it was also something that was partially sparked by the conversations that I had with members of the Graduate Consulting Club. And so again, we look forward to providing more information on the Startup Innovation Fund here at a later date as well. And so with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. I made sure that I've saved some time for questions from members of the audience. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rod. That was simply amazing. My name is Eva Kubu. For those of you joining us, thank you so much for tuning in. Rod, you gave so much detail in so many ways that graduate students can connect with the innovation ecosystem. And I really appreciated that you defined it for us. The map was incredible to see all of our graduate students feel inspired to put themselves on that map is really our aim today, for sure. We do have a few questions that have come in, and so we're going to feature those and hope to tackle some of them in the next few minutes before our next special guest is welcome to the virtual stage. So this one is from Ali Nouri, who we spoke to earlier this morning, Princeton alum and president of the Federation of American Scientists. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. The current COVID crisis reminds us all that science and evidence need to inform solutions to society's problems. Is there a role for your innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives to foster solutions to civic science challenges? And how can Princeton partner with civic science groups to address these challenges?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question, for sure. And I certainly concur with Ali that in this time of pandemic, innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives are extremely important. And I also concur with the viewpoint that science and innovation with regards to civic science challenges needs to merge more. It's something that we are actively thinking about and pursuing and engaging with here in my office in terms of civic science challenges. I have been in constant contact with foundations in which their mission is to promote civic science engagement, and have had, conversations, with these folks brainstorming about, certain things, that we can do, whether or not it's just bringing the problems of civic science to campus, such that our researchers are aware of those problems so that they can address them, or, bringing these communities together, to network and come up with ideas. Certainly, again, in the time of COVID, one of the things that's important, from the innovation viewpoint, is not necessarily the solution. That's the most important, is how that solution engages with society, and it's the engagement with folks that are involved in in civic science that will make sure that solutions that we develop are introduced in society in an equitable manner. And so that's one of the things that I see is in terms of importance, in terms of the innovations and connecting with society, that the science that we do here is introduced in an equitable approach.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. We have another question from John A. How can graduate students explore entrepreneurial interests at Princeton while navigating the rigors of PhD training?
Sure. Again, that's a great question. There are many things that I think graduate students can do to explore the innovation and entrepreneurship activities here on campus while maintaining participation in the rigorous educational activities. One of which is they can merge those two things. I mentioned the Keller Center for Innovation and Engineering Education. They teach a range of courses on innovation and entrepreneurship. And I'd imagine that for most graduate programs, there are at least one or two elective courses that students can take that are not connected to their primary discipline. And so I would certainly encourage our graduate students to consider taking their elective courses, in the Keller Center, so they can learn more about innovation and they can learn more about, entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. What's also true is I think there's a natural, merger as well. Our graduate students are developing new ideas, developing, new insights. They are developing inventions, and the next steps of these new ideas, insights, and inventions is innovation, right? And so that can become an integral part of one's research. And so you're already, there. You're developing the insights, you're developing the ideas, you're filing intellectual property, with your advisor. One just now needs to take the initiative and say, well, I want to go a step further, and work in the innovation space of that. And of course, as I alluded to, we offer research support for students to be engaged in those activities. We offer opportunities for students to pitch their ideas in front of panels. We offer opportunities that are networking for students to engage with alumni as well as business leaders in the area through our conferences that we put on both here on campus as well as off campus. And we certainly look forward to growth of new entrepreneurial activities here on campus. There certain initiatives that are being developed in the background that I wish I can share now, but I'm not at the liberty, of sharing, including even this fall that our graduate students will be able to engage in with regards to innovation and entrepreneurship. So
yeah. Well, thank you, Rod. And I know my Grad Futures team and I are really looking forward to working closely together with you and your team to cultivate those connections between our graduate students and the partners within Princeton's innovation ecosystem, and also our partnerships with our graduate alumni and our broader alumni base. We do have a venture capital and startups learning cohort for our graduate students, brought to us with a collaboration with our great alumni partners at Fitzgate Ventures, and they have really helped to define and also provide some other connections to the innovation ecosystem for graduate students as part of that learning cohort. So we'll continue to bring those types of programs together, working collaboratively. But, you know, again, it was really, in your presentation, it was really also exciting to hear the announcement of the internship with Millipore Sigma. And I know our audience will look forward to hearing more from Dr. Udit Batra in just a few moments. I think we have time for one last question before we transition. So Sarah W. asks, in this time of social distancing, what kinds of virtual opportunities exist at Princeton and beyond?
Sure. Again, another great question. There are a lot of virtual opportunities that are being started here on campus. I certainly encourage the audience to go to the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council website. They are developing a range of different virtual programming. As I mentioned, they now have a new funding series that's virtual. They now have a Monday Night Entrepreneurship series that's virtual, and their Tiger Talks have also went virtual or digital, as they like to say, as well. I'm also aware that the Keller Center has put some of their programming into a virtual format, as well. Mm-hmm. And so I would also, make sure that students are reading the newsletters that are coming out from Graduate Futures, from the Innovation, as well as from the Princeton Entrepreneurship Council that typically list the activities that have been transformed into virtual formats that our students can sign in and engage with. There are also, internships that are going virtual. One of the things that I'm very appreciative and excited about working with MilliporeSigma is that while many other companies are canceling their internships, MilliporeSigma found a way to make some of the internships virtual, right? And some of the professional development format, virtual as well, which is one of the reasons why, again, we're very excited about partnering with them. There's some other initiatives that are being put forth. I'm working with the team of faculty to develop webinars connected to applying for support from the National Science Foundation via SBIR and STTR grants, which are federally funded non-dilutive support to startups and new ventures as well. So quite a bit of activity, but go to the PEC website, and there are several virtual or digital activities and webinars that are being put on.
Absolutely. And just a reminder as well for our graduate students that the Grad Futures website is really serving as a hub. So all of our partners, including the PEC, the Keller Center, all of our wide range of campus partners that offer programming for professional development, for innovation and entrepreneurship. We bring all of that together on our event calendar, so you don't have to hop around to multiple websites where we're bringing it all in as well into our weekly newsletter. So the Grad Futures email that comes into your inbox every Thursday will feature all of these events and programs as well. So we will try and make it as simple as possible for you to literally put yourself on that innovation ecosystem map. Very exciting. Yes, absolutely. And partnering with Millipore Sigma on the professional development aspects of the internship is really an exciting opportunity for the Grad Futures team. We see that as, again, another great connection to industry, and a way that we can partner closely in preparing students with those core skills and competencies that they will need both now and in the future to really propel themselves forward. So I think we have about 2 minutes left before, actually just a minute left before we can begin our introduction. So I think, why don't we go ahead and do that, Rod? If you can introduce our special guest, we know he's waiting in the green room.
Sure, excellent, great. So I am certainly delighted to kick off the second part of this session. Certainly delighted to spend the next 30 minutes in conversation with Dr. Udit Batra, Star 96, the CEO of Millipore Sigma. As Dean Leslie noted in her earlier introductions, Dr. Batra brings a world of leadership and expertise to Millipore Sigma. I am incredibly proud to be a faculty member in the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering, department of which Dr. Batra received his PhD. Dr. Batra has made it his commitment to make sure that he's engaged always with Princeton University. This includes, again, serving on the Advisory Council of Chemical and Biological Engineering, as well as being the lead driver in the Millipore Sigma Princeton partnership that has been recently discussed. Dr. Batra, thank you for your time today, and certainly thank you for your leadership at Millipore Sigma in this time of crisis. So I'm going to start off this interview by giving you an opportunity to share with the audience your experience at Princeton and how you went from Princeton to leading a global life science company in a time of crisis.
Well, good afternoon, Rod, and thank you for having me. Really an honor to be here, and a pleasure to speak to all the people that are listening. I'd start with Princeton. I think it was a formative time in my life. I was fairly young when I started my graduate school. I don't think I was even 20 when I arrived at Princeton. So it was a time of growing up in many different ways. But if I have three things to share from my time, I would say the first one is really being surrounded by absolutely incredible people, right? And having a deep sense of humility that when you look left and you look right, there are people who are so much more committed and so much smarter than you are. So you really can learn a lot. The second is Princeton's campus, right? I mean, it's you cannot not love the campus itself. I mean, I still remember running on the towpath early in the morning with the crew team on Lake Carnegie. It is just an awesome thing. Whenever I'm in Princeton, I make it a point to go for a run there. And the third, and probably the most important, is my learning from my PhD advisor, Bill Russell. I think Bill's known for his exacting standards. I think that I'm aware of as well as his student. He pushed us to learn things at a very fundamental level. That too, I'm very well aware of and learned it from him. But I think what remains for me the most is his kindness and his generosity. He really helped me mature and grow up as a student at Princeton, and I really have him to thank for a lot that I have today. So that's my brief synopsis of Princeton.
Great, thank you. So as a follow-up, to that, just to make sure that we get to this point, as I alluded to, we're certainly in a time of crisis, having to deal with, with COVID-19. I read somewhere that this, is certainly not the first pandemic that you've been involved in addressing. You were part of a team that were coming up with solutions to the H1N1 crisis as well. And so, as head of a global life science company, which Millipore Sigma is, how has Millipore been impacted by the current pandemic, and how is Millipore responding to the current pandemic?
Thank you. I think I have dubious distinction in slightly over a decade to be involved in responding to two different pandemics. In this particular case, the COVID-19 pandemic, it started, at least we found out about its impact sometime late in January. And within about 3 to 4 weeks, one of our largest plants had an employee whose spouse had been diagnosed positive with COVID-19. And very quickly, we decided to shut the site down, send people home, and implement what were then later to be known as social distancing rules rather quickly. The reason I tell you this story is anytime you have a crisis, it puts your priorities front and center. And for us, the priorities were in the following order: employee safety, second, our response to the public health crisis, and third is really making sure our business survives the pandemic. let me talk about how we have been dealing with the crisis and how we maintain these priorities. I already talked about the employee safety aspect. Look, we very quickly set up a team that meets actually every single day, twice with our board and 3 times as a leadership group, twice as a very large group of 35 people, with really 3 objectives. First, to create a common understanding of the situation. I think you will agree with me that while there are many experts who talk about the pandemic, there are more people who interpret their comments for the rest of the day and for the rest of the week. So it's really critical to get a true understanding of what is factual and what is hearsay. And so we've set up, and I learned it in my graduate time, we set up a journal club, which I chair, and we have 3 other colleagues who read primary publications. I do as well. And then we interpret the data to really understand what the public health situation is, what the disease surveillance is, how people are responding around the globe. And that team then reports out to the broader team every single day. Once we've established that common understanding, then we have a solid basis for deciding our actions, right? On the employee safety side, so where are the sites that are going to get impacted as the pandemic moves around the globe? On the demand side of products, China got impacted earlier, so we saw very quickly that the orders that were being placed from our Chinese customers went down, and then they came back up in the last 2 to 3 weeks. So it was a 6 to 8 week time frame when the orders went down and they came back up. So we saw the same sort of trajectory take place in Western Europe and now in North America. So we're paying attention to that piece of the data. And then in our response to the public health crisis, we really are an inextricable part of supplying components. So anybody who's done an experiment in a lab has heard about Millipore filters and has heard about the Sigma Aldrich catalog. We supply over 1.6 million different individual products globally. And that's the number of researchers that come to our website to try and shop. So we have a pulse of what research is going on globally. And that puts us in somehow a very unique position to support all the people who are developing diagnostic kits, all the folks who are developing vaccines, and all the folks who are developing treatments. So we have an aperture into the development and the progression of this pandemic. And through this time, we have managed to sustain our business. The business is doing reasonably well. Our manufacturing and distribution colleagues, albeit at about 80% capacity, are still operating. We've managed to protect everybody while we do it. So our response has been very structured. We meet every day. We go through an agenda which basically establishes a common understanding of the facts, sets our employee-based priorities, and sets our response to the public health crisis. And I just gave you a couple of examples on how we're doing it.
Sure. Great. Thanks for for sharing that insight and overview with us in terms of what Millipore Sigma is doing to address COVID-19. Very much appreciate it. I want to make sure I keep running down some important questions that I know that our graduate students would like to receive answers on and hear from you about. So one of the questions is it's often a misnomer that a career in an industry is considered as an alternative career path for for a PhD, which from my view can be further from the truth. But for those that are currently deciding between a career in academia and a non-academic career, what advice can you offer to someone as a person who's already made this decision some time ago?
Yeah, I think very often we take decisions as binary decisions, right? So the first advice I would have is don't think of anything as binary. There are many chances in your life to go left and right. And I don't know, maybe I'll do another PhD at some point and go become a professor, right? So sure. I have no idea. But right now, and that probably will give you some insight into my thinking. My advice is rather simple. Invest in your competence, number one. Make sure you take the courses that you're supposed to take, make sure you pay attention. If you are doing some modeling, make sure you know how to model. If you're doing some theoretical analysis, make sure you know how to do it, right? So I think investing in your competence is the number one thing that you have to do, right? So there are no shortcuts. Second, graduate school is a unique time when you get a chance to get to know yourself. I took up running like crazy during graduate school. I used to go 13, 14 miles just like that. and you have a lot of energy, you have a lot of strength at the time, so you do it. But I also took up meditation. I spent a lot of time trying to introspect and become more self-aware, and that has stayed with me throughout my life, right? And I would give you that advice as students. Take that time. I mean, as graduate students, we have the flexibility of managing our own schedules, and your advisor is not micromanaging you all the time as long as you do the work. So use that time to grow your self-awareness. And third, and if you develop the self-awareness, spend some time developing some compassion and some empathy, because those last two things are going to be critical for you as you grow in your professional career. But they are useless if you are not competent, right? So I think those would be the pieces of advice I would give. And I have many examples where I try to skip and try to be self-aware, but not competent. I think it's you can have many such examples. So.
Excellent. We may come back to some of those. So let me, moving on. So, upon completion of your graduate education, you first spent time at, Merck USA as a research engineer, which some might view as a logical step for a PhD in chemical and biological engineering. But soon after that, you then moved on to McKinsey & Co., a consulting firm, and then after that, I believe you went to Johnson & Johnson, then over to Vortis, and then to Millipore, and then to become the CEO of MilliporeSigma. And again, in such a short amount of time, you've now become the CEO of MilliporeSigma. So some may think that you've had this planned out since your time as a graduate student. And so can you provide us with some insights into how you went about outlining or designing your career path?
So I think there are some faculty still in the department active from the time I was a student, and I think, Rod, from your smile, I can tell that you know about them. You can ask them. I'm probably not one of those people who planned any of this out. But if you were to ask me as a graduate student, what do you want to do? I was deeply interested in understanding from a scientific point of view what I was doing. I was interested in the moment. For me, that was really, really critical. And as I progressed into Merck, I wanted to do the best research in the world. I really wanted to understand what I was doing in vaccines and what I was doing in small molecules. But as time progressed, and you see the theme is that I don't really plan about the next step in the career and the next step and the next step, let alone plan all the way down 25 years down the line. It's simply contextual. Right. So while in a lab, as an industry, if you spend some time and you're reasonably successful, your group grows and you go further and further away from the bench, and you're not really a problem solver. You become an administrator. And as I became an administrator, I didn't like it much. Right. I said, oh, what is this? Right. I neither get to do the bench work and neither do I get to make big decisions. So how do I traverse this? And I started talking to some friends. They said, there's this business world, and they do other things, and you should learn about this. I said, how do I learn? Wharton. So this was in Pennsylvania. The Wharton School of Business in UPenn was close by. So I registered for some classes in finance and accounting in the evening. Took an accounting class, took a finance class. I said, this is not half as bad. And if this is what's required to go into the business side and learn, get a bit broader understanding of how my work impacts the bigger decisions that the company makes, why not? And as I progressed in that thinking, people said there's this discipline called management consulting. I applied to McKinsey, which was a good management consulting firm. I got in and I left Merck, right? So you can see there's not a lot of planning there. It's just curiosity to learn about something else based on the context. And as I traversed in McKinsey, I loved it. It was terrific learning of business for somebody who had zero background in doing marketing or sales or any sort of commercial work. Terrific experience. And then as that grew, I got interested in other things, got hired at J&J, got hired at Novartis. Basically, again, nothing really specifically planned. Even at Novartis, I was doing strategy work for our CEO at the time. And one day he said, I think you should do a real job. Why don't you go become the president of a country for us? And I said, what does that mean? He said, you be a country head. I said, okay, what does that entail? Do you do sales? Do you do marketing? He said, no, you do everything. And by the way, there's a job opening in Australia. I said, fine. And from there to Australia. And my family went with me. We had a brilliant time in Sydney, in Australia. And then they brought me back after that to Boston. So again, I won't go through each and every transition, but definitely if I had a basic theme, I would say understand the context, Have the humility to learn and take your instincts in a direction that's interesting, but be curious about the direction that you're going in and do a good job when you go there, and other things happen. So if I had to plan now and look back when I finished my undergraduate degree or graduate degree and say this is what I would be doing, I wouldn't know. But now that I'm doing this, I don't think there is a better job for me as an engineer, as a graduate change engineer, to now take the products that I used in the lab, the Mil-X filters that I used in the lab, and now I'm one of the people who produces those types of equipment. I deeply understand what happens in the lab. I spent a whole bunch of time in the pharmaceutical industry in labs. Those are many of our customers. So I have a natural understanding of our customers, and I'm able to relate to what people are talking about. And I still like to read journals. So
excellent. Great. So can I ask in all of these, transitions, was there like a specific question you would ask for yourself? I guess, how did you know it was, time to move on? Because one can become comfortable, kind of complacent. How did you know it was time to move on from position?
You never become complacent, right? I think, I mean, again, you probably can ask the faculty in the department who were there when I was there. I simply can't become complacent. I don't rest. I want to learn something new. I want to be challenged. And as soon as something becomes routine, I know it's time to do something else, right? And I've had incredible luck. In that I've met some great people, some great mentors who helped me in finding these different directions. And then at the end, it's curiosity to keep learning, right? And if you keep those things in mind, your career will progress automatically. I mean, you of course have to make sure that you're competent and you're working hard. But if I were to pick a couple of things, I'd say be curious. Of course, have good luck, and make sure that you associate yourself with good mentors who are always challenging you, always teaching you. But no, there's no mechanical process, Rod. I don't have a protocol.
I certainly thanks for sharing the viewpoint that you took evening classes at Wharton Business School to kind of hone some of your financial literacy and skills, etc., which was certainly connected to a question that I was going to raise. But I want to bring up another question that's related to skills as well. In my presentation earlier, I noted a study from Google that tried to understand what were the top skills of the most innovative people at Google, and they came up with 8 skills. And technical skills was number 8. It was professional skills and soft skills, as we say, that were number 1 through 7, that were identified as the top skills of innovators, at Google. And so I'm curious, in your opinion, what are the most important professional skills and soft skills that our graduate students should be looking to develop at this time?
I think I would have to disagree with the survey. The survey is the survey, or maybe they have incredibly competent people. For me, the 8th one is probably the most important. If it is technical skills that are warranted for you to write a program, you better know them. If you're in the finance department and you have to close the books for the company, you better know finance. If you're a marketeer, you better know marketing. Competence matters, and it matters the most. There is no room for nonsense, right? When you're making big decisions. So, and the business world is the same. I mean, you talked about finance and accounting, right? That world is exactly the same as the technical world. People who talk in long sentences and use a lot of jargon usually don't know what they're talking about, right? This was true for me as well, right? So I learned fluid mechanics as an undergrad, and as a student of Bill Russell, we had to know fluid mechanics very well because we were doing research in colloids. And I took a course in my first year from Dudley Saville. So he was an incredible teacher. I learned a lot, but I truly learned fluid mechanics when I was a teaching assistant for Roy Jackson. And Professor Jackson had these notes, and he could explain very difficult concepts in simple English, right? And if you ask me what was the one skill from a competence standpoint that I picked up that goes above everything else at Princeton, it was the ability to force myself to simplify. And to simplify, you have to learn things at a very fundamental level. And it's true in the business world as well. And the mark of a competent person is the ability to simplify complex concepts so that everybody can understand. Right? And that's the task of a leader as well, to simplify and to focus the organization. So the first skill would be content orientation, and then once you learn that content, test yourself and ask yourself, do I truly understand what is written? And if you don't, go back to your professors, go back to the others. The second skill I would urge people to spend time on, and I mentioned this earlier, is self-awareness, and the third one is empathy, right? I talked about those earlier. But if I move on a little bit and say, okay, what can you spend time training yourself on? I think writing, good writing and good communication is critical, right? If you are a leader and you have to speak in public environments, you have to be able to explain things so that they are simply spoken, simply understood. You have to be able to talk about things that are memorable. So a rule of communication is make it simple, make it memorable, and make it impactful, right? So rich content is impactful. Make it simple, make that content simple, and then make sure that it is memorable at the end. And I think to me that if you spend time on the first three, competence, self-awareness, and empathy, and you feel like you have time, spend time learning how to write, spend time learning how to speak. And these are things that I wish we had practiced even more, right? We did as graduate students. You have to give seminars, you have to go speak in complex, you have to go talk about complex concepts. But I don't think we did enough to tell ourselves, hey, these are complex concepts, but you can explain them simply. We had people who were super smart, but sometimes you got lost in jargon. So that's the skill I would really ask people to spend some time on.
Great. And those skills are all certainly valuable and extremely important for professional development and certainly in terms of honing one's own leadership skills. And so, speaking of leadership, I read somewhere that under your leadership, the divisions that you led at both Novartis as well as Millipore became the fastest growing divisions or the most profitable divisions at each one of those enterprises. And so my take on that is it can't be a coincidence. Okay. So can you describe your leadership skills or offer some leadership advice to our current graduate students?
As I said earlier, it's a lot of luck. And 2 points don't make a trend, Rod, right? And even
there's a third one as well.
Even the third one could, but it can also be a parabola, right? So I think to me, but if I were to pick out themes, if I were in all seriousness, I would pick out themes and say what works. It's creating a common understanding of the situation, really, like we do in our research, right? So you do a literature review. You learn that skill as a researcher. You say, okay, let me first understand what people are saying. So you spend time reading papers and you talk to people, you talk to your advisor. Have you understood what's being said, what's being listed, what's being written? So the first and the most important step is creating a common understanding of the situation. And if you do that, the insights start to emerge, right? And if you do it with people who are competent with their skills, really good insights emerge and you get short-term and long-term priorities lined up, right? So the first step is common understanding of the situation. The second is really getting the priorities to emerge out of that situation. And the third, and the most important is once you've set those priorities, make sure you've selected good people, then you leave them alone, right? Mm-hmm. Don't get in their way. Let them also rediscover their way of doing things as opposed to micromanaging it. But to me, creating a common understanding is the most critical step, and it's the most difficult, right? I mean, when you're going into a new area, this was true when I was doing my PhD, this was true when I joined Merck, this was true when I joined McKinsey or any new job. You always have, that's the most interesting and the most difficult time because you're learning the language and then you have to form your own point of view as a consequence. And there are many examples of this, right? I could give you many examples from the different jobs that I've had where this has really, really helped to create also the unity in a team.
Excellent. So I'll ask one more question before we open the floor up to members of the audience. Again, related to your leadership, but now also connected to one of the themes of this session, which is innovation. And so under your leadership at Millipore, they've won many awards related to innovation, including the R&D 100 award multiple years in a row. And so I'm very curious, from your viewpoint, what is the innovation process, at Millipore? How do you encourage it? And how do you encourage your faculty to take risk?
I wish there were faculty at
Oh, excuse me.
The shoe would
I'm
be on
still
the other
honed into
foot.
the academic side. Yes.
It would be interesting. No, I think at the end, innovation is taking an insight and turning it into something useful, be it a product or a service, right? And so you have to ask yourself, how do you get an insight, right? At the end, you get an insight by first studying the situation, by studying again the facts, and then looking for, I would say, tangential ideas that observations that are not consistent with the theories. And if the observations are not consistent with the theory, then the theory is wrong. And that's an insight, right? And we learned this in our PhD. Let me give you an example from our PhD days. Towards the end of my PhD, Bill used to have a rule. I don't know if he still does, but Bill definitely had a rule that for his graduate students who did mostly experimental work, which is what I was doing, they had to do a theory. They had to derive something that was a problem in the literature. So we picked something, right? Don't ask me why we picked it. Maybe I was the stupidest guy in the world because this was the last thing I had to do before my PhD was going to be finished. So Bill said, Udit, you have to derive this thing. I said, okay. So we picked it and we started working on the problem. And it was the most difficult mathematical problem. Physically, I could describe it. I came up with the equation and then it was fine. That took me 3-4 weeks. But then for 2-3 months, I was just struggling with this mathematical thing, right? And I went to Bill, I said, can we not just do this computationally? He said, no. You don't do computational work, you derive it. It has to be analytical, right? So I don't know. I don't know how it is now, but at that point, true theoreticians were analytical. And if you didn't know how to do analytical work, you became computational. I don't believe in that anymore, but definitely that was the thinking by my advisor. I was stuck, and one day, super frustrated, eating my lunch from Hoagie Haven. I think Hoagie Haven must still be there on Nassau Street. So he's eating my lunch from Hoagie Haven, and as a grad student, I could eat the whole thing. I suspect that would last me for days now. I was eating and just rather frustrated. Sitting in the lab writers' lounge, one assistant professor walked in, and we started talking. And she said, "What's going on?" I said, This thing is 2 months, 2.5 months. This is just nonsense. I can't solve this." And I just kept going on. And she said something in that conversation as I described it. She said, "Well, have you just done the reciprocal of this function?" And I said, "Okay, I don't know. I must have. I've tried thousands of things." But that stuck with me. And after lunch, still frustrated, I went into the lab and I tried it, and it worked. Right? And that's the second aspect of getting an insight. You study the facts, but if you have another person who has studied something different and comes to you with a different vantage point, that truly can create breakthroughs. And for me, that is what we try to create at Millipore Sigma. We have an innovation board where we have about 13 different business units with each their own R&D head. We bring them together once a month and create. Everybody's competent in their own field. They know their facts, but they present to each other. And I tell you, it's magic, right? And we also did this during the COVID, early parts of the COVID crisis. We brought this team and we brought some external folks together as well and said, okay, what can we do short term and long term? And we came up with such, I would say, interesting ideas. I wouldn't call them brilliant yet because nothing is done, but some interesting ideas on how we could combat the pandemic now and how could we make an impact in a lasting way. And the other thing that's the creative process. Then to execute it, I heard you talk about it earlier. We basically have a very regimented problem solving process, meaning you spend time creating a problem statement, which is clear, concise, time bound, and you have to agree on it before you can start. And you know that's the most difficult thing when you're trying to solve a problem. So you have the insight, you create a problem statement, and then in the execution, there's a regimented process. So you come up with a product, So all of that gives you just our normal process. And then outside of that, we also do a bunch of experiments. So sometimes we have ideas where the competences, there are about 22,000 of us. So the competence might be spread around the globe. And it might be an interesting area for research, for instance, gene editing and cell therapy. And we had experts around the globe. So we brought them together and we said, okay, let's create a separate business like a startup. We appointed a CEO and we gave them a budget and said, okay, go execute. That was 3-4 years ago. And now we have 27 patents in gene editing. as a consequence. So a few levers, but I wanted to just take you through that journey.
Thanks for sharing that, for sure. So I'll pass over the mic to my colleague Ava, who might want to take one or two questions from members of the audience in a very rapid fire manner.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Batra, thank you so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure to really hear your journey. Lots of inspiration and certainly memorable advice. I think one of the points particularly is really that careers are not a perfectly linear path, that you need to be open to discovery, and that it's an iterative process. You're learning about yourself, you're learning about industry, you're learning as you go, and so those points are really, really well taken. We know we have lots of questions, so we'll tee up two if you're okay to stay a few minutes beyond 1:30.
No problem, I have some time, no problem.
Wonderful, thank you. So James L asks, Thank you both. I saw the slide with internships for incoming PhDs. Can you talk a bit about similar opportunities for graduate students who are already on campus?
I think if your advisors allow you to get off campus for 3 to 4 months, we would love to welcome you. I would not want to create a carte blanche like we did with the incoming students. I think that the incoming student idea was one that came in the advisory council. We were discussing it with the advisory council, and the advisory council said all these students are coming in. Very often they have never really worked in the real world, and in the old days, chemical engineers were people who knew how to design distillation columns, and now everybody's doing everything computationally. So how do we give them practical experience? And I said, well, it's a win-win. I mean, how big is your class? It's between 12 and 18 people. We can accommodate 18 people around the globe, and it's a win-win because we get reasonably smart people who get to understand our company, and you get an experience that could help you determine what you really want to do. So it was a no-brainer. I mean, 18 people for the population of 22,000 is really nothing, and I think we will hopefully have a few this year.
Yeah, well, we're very excited to work together on the professional development aspects of that program as well. You mentioned earlier as well personal well-being and ways that you were attending to self-care and compassion and empathy. Of course, we all realize that these are particularly anxious and stressful times for all of us, and our graduate students who are about to leave Princeton. When they graduate, they're worried about what lies ahead. So our next question is from a current graduate student who says, many graduate students are feeling anxious about their next steps in the post-COVID-19 landscape. What advice would you give to those of us who are about to leave Princeton? And by leave, they mean by graduation.
No, it's a very good question. When I finished my undergraduate degree, we were in the midst of sort of a crisis. When I finished graduate school, we were starting to recover. So I'm deeply familiar with that anxiety, right? As to what do you do next if you don't have a job offer or a faculty offer or a postdoc offer, what do you do? Look, you have to have the belief that what you have done matters. The education you have matters. The time scale is irrelevant, right? And I say this from experience, right? So for me, I went to McKinsey 5 years after I'd gone to spent in R&D. You could say, well, did you waste your time? Should you have gone sooner? Should you have gone later? I already explained that it doesn't matter. At the end, I had the belief the skills that I had mattered, and they were unique, and I could make a contribution no matter where I went, right? The problem-solving skills that I gathered at Princeton, at Delaware before that, the way they were honed by getting raised by different faculty members and fellow graduate students, they were honed and they were useful for society at large. So have that conviction, and I think that'll take you through a lot of crises. Second, during this time, take the opportunity to learn the skills that we talked about earlier, right? Don't underestimate the importance of good communication, of spending time to understand who you are, especially during a difficult time, and getting to know your fellow graduate students. And number three, from a practical standpoint, make sure you make contacts, right? It's not going to land in your. So what I didn't mention to folks is, I was fortunate to have so many mentors, right? And people, while I was not looking for anything, there were folks who were looking at me when I was doing something, and whatever I was doing, if it was well done, they thought I could be useful somewhere else. So the reason I went to McKinsey's was because one of my friends who used to work at Merck said, "Hey, you'll be great at McKinsey," right? And so he got me sucked into McKinsey. When I had to go to Novartis, a friend of mine was at Novartis, and he said, "Oh, but they're looking for a head of strategy." I would have never known, right? So again, do what you're doing well. Don't let your anxiety get in the way of developing your competence. Have conviction that your competence matters. I can tell you from experience that your competence at Princeton matters, and it's just a matter of time, right? And use that time to pick up some other skills that are going to last you for your lifetime, and it'll work. Make no mistake. There is a lot of room for good people, and we have a lot of room for good people.
That's wonderful. Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time, particularly we know how busy you are, how busy your organization is. They're fortunate to have you as a leader. Hearing about your leadership philosophy is really also inspiring to all of us. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. We look forward to our continued partnership and learning more about our new frontiers with our new internship program at Millipore Sigma.
Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, you can always write, and I'm sure we'll find the time to answer them and send them back to you. Thank you again for having me. I really feel honored to represent our company. Thank you.
Well, we're honored for you joining us at this very busy time and for offering this inspiration for our graduate students.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it. Signing off, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you all.